Welcome to our synopsis of our Dark Ages vampire game, Merchants of Venice. This is a retrospective in 3 parts, and I decided to split it into 3 because I felt really I wanted to give you bite-sized chunks that you could kind of take in as our story unfolds in our V5 story and kind of have them as a point of reference. There will be a lot of things left out, but we're going to hit the high notes so that few things make more sense as you're going through listening through our V5 story. So this is kind of a companion piece to that. Now, let's go ahead and get right into it. We're going to cover, I would say the first 6 to 7 chapters of that story. There were about 19 chapters total. And we'll kind of do it as a beginning, middle, and end. The beginning will establish a lot of our players in that story, as well as give you the most tiebacks that I can to that story that will help you make sense of V5. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Our story begins in Venice, Italy. What would become Venice, Italy. At this time, it was actually its own city-state. This was in the 13th century, around the 1230s or so. Our protagonists of this story are Rina Roselli, played by Monica, which was a La Sombra, and Vicinta Giovanni, played by Dee, who was at this time a Cappadocian. The story starts off with the kindred of the city attending a masquerade ball at the prince's estate. At this time, and they still kind of nod back to it in Venice, there was a festival called Carnival, and this masquerade ball was to kick off the Carnival season. The typical vampire society shenanigans ensue, with rumors being slung around about movers and shakers doing things behind the scenes to kind of plant seeds of our story. Things that really won't be relevant, with the exception of one. One rumor that does stand out above all the others is that a Tremere by the name of Zio is in Negroponte and is here on business with the prince. The prince, who is also a La Sombra named Guillermo Aliprando, he makes an appearance after rubbing elbows himself and making the usual grand speeches. Soon after that, he pulls our protagonists off to the side and asks them to investigate and remove a Romani camp that is set up near the Doge's estate. The Doge is kind of your mayor/ruler of the city-state of Venice at this time. While planning their approach to handle the situation, which they do agree to, it is revealed in their planning while they're outside the gates that Rina sometimes sees a vision of a demon known as Ashes that taunts her and seems to appear at the worst possible moments. And after this incident, the coterie discovers, upon moving into the camp, that there is a Ravnos with the caravan by the name of Jessipina. They speak with Jessipina and convince her to have the caravan move to the plaza and set up there as the Carnival season is approaching. And it would be a good opportunity for them to make money. It's a win for everybody. They don't have to resort to violence and, trying to run these people out. And the Doge definitely wanted to get rid of them by any means necessary. So this seems like the most amicable approach. It will require the permission of the prince and calling in favors to get this done, but it's something that they decide to do. Jessipina agrees, and they take this plan to the prince, and the prince does agree as long as they pay the fees necessary to set the Romani up in the square, and as long as Vicinta accepts fosterage, aka being responsible for Jessipina while the Romani and she are in town. Some money changes hands. A number of promises are made. Rina finances this with her husband's money, and the coterie secures a place in the festival area. The only problem is that in order for the Romani to get established, some of the noble families that have already paid their way into having their spot in the festival have to lose their place. Naturally causes some hard feelings when this happens, and later on, soon after this, there is an attack in the square by people dressed up as Romani, but they are clearly speaking with a Venetian dialect. Rina and Vicinta do manage to squelch this little uprising, but we will get to that in a moment. Before they do, right before this attack breaks out, they meet up with a fortune teller named Madame Zio. And during their encounter with Zio, she tells Vicenta, Zio does, that her husband is not really dead, but is rather being held by a powerful force that he can't escape. Rena decides to feed off this fortune teller, and the blood that she tastes kind of makes her beast go crazy, and it's all she can do not to kill this woman. And she does dominate her, make her forget that all this went down, but it kind of haunts her that maybe there was something to her visions. They weren't just the cons of a mad woman. Soon after this incident, we have our fight, and Rena and Vicenta step up and put a stop to it, learning again that the fighters are not truly Romani, and worse still, that the fighters are ghouls. And they learn that it specifically is ghouls of some high-ranking members of Clan Toreador, and specifically ghouls of a vampire named Madalena Corsini. We will get to more on her in later stories. I promise you, in Chapter 2, you'll hear a lot more about her. After some quick thinking to defuse a possible masquerade breach, arms of Ahriman don't go well when you're doing it in the middle of a city square. The coterie regroups with their sires, and it is here we kind of have some character development. We meet Rena's husband and sire, Antonio, who is a traveling merchant, and he arrives back in town. She tells him what they've been doing, assisting with the Romani, and he seems proud, but Rena has some unanswered questions from earlier when she was looking through their books trying to finance this Romani stay at the plaza, that some of the numbers don't add up, and it looks like they don't have as much money on the books as the books claim they do, kind of reading between the lines of the ledgers. She does kind of keep this in her pocket and doesn't really bring it up at the time, but it's something to kind of, she keeps in mind, and it will appear later, which is why I mention it. So shortly after this, the coterie and her and Antonio will be summoned before the prince to discuss the masquerade breach from the night before. Before that happens, though, I know we're hopping all over the place, but we do that a lot in our stories. Ella Messina, while Rena is meeting up with Antonio, Vicenta is meeting with Ella Messina. And this is the first time that we meet Ella Messina Giovanni. Here we get to see that Ella Messina doesn't resemble the hideously disfigured Tarman-esque figure, aka a la Return of the Living Dead, that she had in Wraith, and is talked about in our story of how desiccated she looked. Instead, she's nonetheless starting to show some of the signs of the Cappadocian curse of decaying, but not to the level that we'll see later. You can actually recognize her as a kindred, and she can still somewhat pass as a mortal. When Vicenta comes down, she's in the middle of an anatomy lesson. Ella Messina is dissecting a cadaver for a ritual. At this point, Vicenta offers that she could take what she's learning and use it possibly to learn more about how Ignacio died, her husband. And Ella Messina seems to balk at that comment, and then kind of quickly turns the subject to having go before the prince about the masquerade breach. But it's suspicious enough in how she plays it off, and doesn't really want to address it, that Vicenta knows that Ella Messina is lying about Ignacio's death and knows more than what she is telling her. So they all go to meet the prince, and rather than final death, which is, probably not the best course of action for him, but it's mentioned because, hey, you got to scare him with the prince, right? He instead agrees to boons as payment for covering up any of the loose ends of their masquerade breach, and in turn sends them to find Jessipina and to mete out final justice for her. The coterie does find her on a gondola. She's trying to leave town, and through coercion discover who she really is and why she was in Venice. It is this time we mentioned earlier that she was a Ravnos, but not only that, she was a spy for the Tremere Zio, who we mentioned earlier that was at court and is a Tremere from Negroponte. And she was paying back a boon that Zio requested by having the Romani stay on the Doge's estate. The reason this was done is to cause problems for the prince during the Carnival season and to also act as a stressor so that the prince would possibly be quicker to make a decision about granting Zio domain over the entire island of Negroponte. She reports that Zio has been especially interested in Rina and Vicenta's activity with the Romani since it kind of messed up his plans. The coterie in their fight had killed a high-ranking ghoul by the name of Hidalgo Corsini. Hidalgo was a ghoul and the brother of Madalena Corsini. They had popped his head off, just to be blunt, and they wrapped the head up in the Corsini shawl that they had discovered, embroidered with the Corsini name, and took this head to Ella Messina to extract information from his spirit. Ella Messina tells them, and Giuseppina is in tow when all this is going down so they can get more information about what's happening. Ella Messina tells them this will require a journey of sorts to the underworld. It is at this time yet again that Rina's demon, Ashes, shows up and begins taunting Rina, and this has become nearly a every night thing. So persistent, in fact, that Rina at this moment decides she's going to do something about it. Perhaps later at a time, we will discover, get Ella Messina's help to rid herself of this demon. Ella Messina leaves her body and begins to journey into the spirit world to find Hidalgo's spirit. While she is doing this, she is not conscious of what is going on around her, and Giuseppina is asked by Vicenta, there we go, we got there, that she would like her if she's going to flee to Negroponte, which is the plan, to go to her husband Ignacio's crypt and report what she finds. She will do that, and we will learn about that in just a moment, about those discoveries. So Ella Messina finally, gets back and brings the spirit of Madalena's brother back with her, and he admits that he got a note from his sister asking him to stage an attack at the plaza. She was angry that the Romani took stalls away from noble Venetian families, and it's at this time Vicenta compels him to leave nothing out, which it seemed like he was, and he reveals that Madalena, trigger warning right here for incest, Madalena isn't just his sister, but also his lover, and had planned on siring him. Yes, gross, I know. The prince was asked during the masquerade party. They had seen Madalena speaking with him and then leave in a huff. And she asked if she could have the rights to sire him, and she was brushed off. This in turn made Madalena even angrier at the Romani situation because her request was put on the back burner for it and the Carnival. Seeing further that the Romani were able to take stalls and gain so much in this time just spurred her wrath. And it's at this moment that the Corsini family has every reason to have animosity against Rina and Vicenta for moving their plan forward. And it's upon hearing all this and knowing that Hidalgo has this information as a spirit, not knowing what Madalena is capable of, Ella Messina, in order to hide all the evidence, completely consumes the spirit of Hidalgo. Giuseppina is there, as I mentioned, and she sees all this go down, but Ella Messina pays her 20 ducato, which is the currency at the time, and asks her to leave Venice and head to Negroponte. And this coincides well with Vicenta's previous ask to, go, because we had heard earlier in the story that Jessipina was planning on going back to kind of report to Zio what she found, working double agent, if you will. This goes well with the plan of seeing what's going on with the crypt before heading to Negroponte. And she is asked by Ella Messina to report on a cemetery that she finds there and let her know exactly what she finds when she gets there, what she observes, who she meets, what she finds. Jessipina, eager to get the hell out of Venice and away from all these crazy-ass vampires, is eager to agree, and also secretly comes off to the side and agrees to Vicenta's plans. A couple days later, Vicenta gets a note saying that she, in Ignacio's crypt, discovers a skeleton wrapped in cloth in his tomb, but that the skeleton is wooden. So it is in fact true that Ignacio, her suspicions are almost confirmed 100% that Ignacio isn't really dead. Something suspicious is going down, and that something has happened to him. On the way back from watching Jessipina leave port, Vicenta runs into Zio, who is out with the scourge of the city. And he states that it's an honor to meet her and that he would love to discuss power and secret knowledge with her sometime. Typical Tremere stuff. Zio does ask where Jessipina is, and Vicenta tells him that she released her from her fosterage and she's left town. But Jessipina did leave behind her possessions, specifically a caravan, and Zio asks if he can come reclaim it since he was working with her and she owed him money, and she's like, sure, it's of no matter to me, certainly. Seems happy about this offer and says that he'll do that soon. As he's leaving, he turns to her and says that he appreciates her and her family's generosity, which kind of gives her a moment of pause. Later that night, Vicenta hears a cry of sorrow and rage coming from above her estate. We'll discover more about that in our next synopsis that we do. Till then, if you have any questions, anything that, maybe there's a lot of information to cover in a very short time that wasn't so clear, please leave questions in the comments, and I will be glad to come back and answer any of those. I'm going to give it a couple of weeks that this will be up, and if there's anything that you need to know, I'll answer it in the next recording. Also, if you're hearing this and it's way past that window, please leave a comment as well, and I'll try my best to answer anything you may have in that in a reply to that comment. But until our second part of our synopsis, this is GM Tuck wishing you all a good night. Have a great one, everyone.